Chapter 18, The Expanding Kingdom. Marco woke up to the sound of a deep rumble echoing through his kingdom. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment he thought he was dreaming. But the vibration beneath him was unmistakable. He quickly rolled out of bed, careful not to disturb Lena, who was curled up next to him, snoring softly. Throwing on his gear, Marco stepped outside the house and took in the sight of his expanding kingdom. The edges of his territory had stretched farther than the day before, creating more space near the cliffside. The small patio he'd built was now twice the size, and a new pathway seemed to be forming on its own, snaking along the side of the abyss. As he stood there, confused but intrigued, Lily appeared beside him, as if summoned by the change itself. "Morning, Fluffgrath," she said with a smirk. "Morning," Marco grunted, still scanning the surroundings. "What's going on?" "The kingdom is growing." Lily nodded, crossing her arms. "It's because people have been spending time here. The more people enter your kingdom and stay within it, the more it will grow. Every time, though, it'll take more people or more time to expand it further. You're lucky it's growing so fast." Marco raised an eyebrow. "So the more who visit, the bigger it gets?" "Pretty much," Lily said. "Your kingdom reflects the energy and influence you're building. Right now, it's small because you've only got your little party and me, but keep adding more and you might see it turn into something much bigger." That idea sparked something in Marco's mind. He wasn't just crafting weapons or fighting for himself. He was creating something. A real, growing kingdom. "Good to know," he muttered. Determined to push forward, Marco returned to his house and began preparing for the day. He sat down at his crafting table and opened his artisan's edge window. His mind was already racing with ideas. He'd need to craft tools for the team, things to make their work easier so they could gather materials while he fought. He quickly made spatial bags, simple but incredibly useful. "These can hold a lot more than a regular bag, and you won't feel the weight," he explained as he handed one to each of the brothers and Lena. Mulgrok looked at the bag skeptically. "More room for meat?" "Yep," Marco grinned. "And no more lugging heavy stuff around." Thragor grunted in approval, while Gorgrath tried to fit his entire arm into the bag before realizing it wouldn't let him pass the limit. After that, Marco crafted a pickaxe for the brothers to use while mining rare ores on the 3rd and 4th floors. He handed Lena a special brewing pot designed for potion making. "You're going to need this," Marco said, pushing the pot toward her. Lena pouted, clearly uninterested. "But I don't want to brew potions. It's boring." Marco gave her a firm look. "You need the practice. You're a goblin witch, remember? If you get better at brewing, we'll be able to use more advanced potions later. You'll thank me." She sighed but took the pot, clearly not convinced. "Fine, I'll brew, but only because you asked." With the basic tools out of the way, Marco turned his attention to the real task, weapons for the brothers. Each one had their own fighting style, and Marco intended to craft something suited to their strengths. He focused his breathing technique and let the crafting flow through him. For Thragor, the strongest and most disciplined of the three, Marco crafted a massive warhammer of the Iron Mountain, a heavy, brutal weapon designed to smash anything in its path. The hammer's head was etched with ancient runes that gave it a faint, pulsating glow. For Mulgrok, who loved to devour and overpower his enemies, Marco created a battle axe of devouring flame, a weapon with twin blades that seemed to shimmer with heat. It was lighter than Thragor's hammer, but just as deadly, with flames dancing along its edges when swung. For Gorgrath, the nimble yet unpredictable brute, Marco made a longsword of the shifting stone, a weapon that was swift, flexible, and hard-hitting. The sword could change its weight slightly in the midst of a fight, giving Gorgrath an edge when shifting between heavy blows and quick strikes. Marco handed each of them their weapon, watching their reactions. Thragor gave the hammer an approving nod. "Feels right," he muttered, giving it a test swing. The weight barely seemed to slow him down. Mulgrok hefted the battle axe with a wide grin, already imagining the destruction it could cause. "I'll make good use of this," he rumbled. Gorgrath, ever the playful one, swung the longsword experimentally, laughing at how it shifted in his grip. "This'll do! This'll do!" With their tools and weapons prepared, the group descended to the 3rd floor, ready to hunt down the floor boss. Marco's goal was simple: defeat the boss, gather materials, and train for the challenges ahead. The brothers took turns mining the rare ores they found scattered across the floor, while Marco handled most of the fighting. With his speed and strength enhanced by his rabbit core, he moved through the battlefield like a force of nature, slaying monsters left and right while the brothers gathered the drops. Lena wandered off to gather herbs, occasionally grumbling about her potion-making duties, but whenever Marco wasn't looking, she couldn't help but grin at how easily the herbs seemed to come to her. "Hubby," Lena called out as she stuffed more herbs into her spatial bag. "When I'm done here, we're going to have a lot of potions. Enough for a whole army." Marco chuckled, wiping blood from his hands after downing another beast. "That's the idea. I'm counting on you." Whenever Marco needed a break, he let the brothers take over, giving them a chance to practice with their new weapons. They were still getting used to the weight and power of their tools, but with each swing, they grew more comfortable. Thragor, ever the leader, stood with his hammer poised, studying his movements. "I've never had a weapon like this," he admitted. "Feels like I'm holding something ancient." Gorgrath swung his longsword recklessly, missing a few strikes but laughing wildly. "This thing is alive. It shifts while I'm moving." Molgrok, meanwhile, was hacking into a pile of dead monsters, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "It burns." "I love it," he roared, his battle axe glowing with the flames of his strikes. Marco took it all in, pleased with how they were adapting to their roles. Everyone was getting stronger, more focused. His party was shaping up into a formidable team. Lena, however, had other thoughts. When Marco returned from the battlefield, tired and sweaty, she pulled him aside, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Hubby, you've been fighting all day. I think it's time for a little fun, don't you?" Marco raised an eyebrow. "You're supposed to be gathering herbs," Lena shrugged, leaning closer. "I am, but I can multitask." Despite the exhaustion, Marco couldn't help but smile. "All right, but make sure your brothers don't burn down the forest while we're gone." Lena laughed and led him away, her voice teasing. "Don't worry, they're too busy enjoying their new toys." As the day wound down, the group gathered back at Marco's kingdom for rest. Lily appeared again, her eyes sharp as she looked over the group. "You've been busy, Fluffgrath Longfoot." Marco grinned, leaning against the wall. "Yeah, we've made good progress." "They've leveled up fast," Lily said, eyeing Lena's brothers. "At this rate, you'll be hitting Iron 4-star by the end of the week." "We've got a long way to go," Marco admitted, "but we're getting there." Lena appeared beside him, grinning as she showed off her potion-making supplies. "See? I'm useful too. Potions for everyone." Molgrok gave her a wary look. "Just make sure none of those potions turn us into toads or something." Lena giggled. "Only if you ask nicely." Chapter 19. The Bonds of Battle. The journey down to the third floor's dungeon boss was filled with anticipation. Marco, though strong enough to take down the boss alone, wanted to test Lena's brothers. He had equipped them with high-grade weapons crafted from rare materials, and now it was time to see if the tools, along with their training, would be enough for them to handle a dungeon boss on their own. When they finally reached the boss room, Marco stepped back, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "All right, you three," he said, nodding at Thragor, Molgrok, and Gorgrath. "This one's all yours. I want to see what you can do." The brothers exchanged glances, each of them gripping their new weapons tightly. Thragor hefted his warhammer of the Iron Mountain, feeling its immense weight but also the powerful surge of magic that pulsed through it. Molgrok twirled his battle axe of devouring flame, the heat radiating from the blade ready to burn anything in its path. Gorgrath, with his usual mischievous grin, swung his longsword of the shifting stone, the blade feeling like an extension of his arm, shifting with each movement. The dungeon boss emerged, a towering, monstrous creature with thick, leathery skin and an aura of ancient power. Its eyes gleamed with malice, but Marco wasn't concerned. He trusted the brothers. The fight was intense. Throgor led the charge, his warhammer smashing into the boss's legs, forcing it off balance. Molgrok's fiery battle axe struck next, leaving searing burns on the creature's hide. Gorgrath danced around the beast with his longsword, slicing at its limbs and weakening it. Though the boss was strong, the teamwork and the power of the brothers' weapons overwhelmed it. In a matter of minutes, the boss fell, crumbling to the ground with a deafening roar. As the dust settled, Marco smiled. The brothers had done it. "You did good," Marco said as he approached them. "Welcome to Iron 3-Star." The brothers grinned, their pride evident in the way they held their weapons, but Marco frowned slightly as he opened his stats window. He hadn't gained any experience from the fight. "Looks like these monsters are too low level for me to gain anything," he muttered to himself. They descended to the 4th floor next, continuing their grind. But something curious happened. Rather than getting more difficult, the battles seemed to be getting easier for the ogres. They were dispatching monsters with increasing ease, their new weapons giving them an undeniable advantage. Marco realized the quality of the gear he had crafted was higher than he'd thought. The rare materials he had used from the previous floors were making the brothers stronger by the hour. There are better weapons I can craft. Marco thought to himself, but they'll require materials from the floor bosses. For the next 2 days, they dedicated themselves to hunting down each of the 4th floor bosses. The fights were grueling, but with their combined strength, the party emerged victorious each time. By the end of it, the brothers had grown even stronger, reaching the peak of Iron 3-Star. As night fell on the 2nd day, the party returned to Marco's kingdom, which had expanded once again. The yard had been transformed into an outdoor kitchen. A large square table sat in the middle, big enough to seat 10 people on each side. Benches flanked each side of the table, offering plenty of space for the group to relax after their hard work. In the center of the table was a hollowed-out fire pit that served as a stove, with a pot bubbling away and an icebox sitting next to it, keeping their drinks cool. Lena was at the fire, cooking a huge cut of meat over the flames. The smell of roasting meat filled the air, making everyone's stomachs rumble in anticipation. One of her brothers, Gorgrath, was proudly serving the makeshift beer he had brewed from the strange plants Lena had gathered. The taste was rough, but it had a warm kick to it that made everyone laugh after the first sip. Lily bustled around the table, serving plates and making sure everyone had what they needed. "I don't usually play hostess," she said with a grin, "but I'll make an exception this time." Everyone was seated, laughing and joking, passing plates of food around the table. The mood was light, and for the first time since entering the dungeon, it felt like more than just a party of adventurers. It felt like family. Mulgrok leaned back on his bench, his giant frame making the wooden seat creak. "This beer ain't bad, eh?" he said, lifting his mug. "Could use more meat, though." Thragor grunted in agreement, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. The fights were good today. Strong monsters, but not strong enough. Gorgrath, sitting across from him, smirked. "You just want something bigger to smash with your hammer." Thragor shrugged. "And what's wrong with that?" Lena, stirring the pot, called out to Marco. "Hubby, make sure you eat up. You need your strength for tomorrow's fights." Marco, sitting between the brothers and enjoying the food, chuckled. "I'm fine, Lena. You're the one who's been working hard all day with those potions." Lena grinned, clearly enjoying her role. "Well, someone has to keep you all alive. Plus, the potions are turning out better than I expected." Lily, still serving plates, chimed in. "And here I thought you hated brewing potions." "I do," Lena said with a laugh. "But if it means I get to keep fighting alongside Marco, I'll do it." Marco smiled at that, feeling a sense of warmth and contentment that he hadn't felt in a long time. The party was strong, getting stronger with each fight, and they were forming a bond that went beyond just fighting together. They were becoming a family. Gorgrath suddenly raised his mug, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "To Fluffgrath Longfoot," he yelled, and the others quickly joined in, raising their mugs in unison. "To Fluffgrath Longfoot," everyone shouted, laughing as they clinked their mugs together. Marco shook his head, grinning. "I'm never going to live that name down, am I?" Lena leaned over, placing a hand on his arm. "Nope. It suits you, hubby." As the night wore on, the group continued to eat, drink, and share stories of their battles. The fire crackled in the center of the table, casting a warm glow over everyone as the stars twinkled above the abyss. It was a peaceful moment, one that reminded Marco of why he was doing all of this. He wasn't just building strength for himself, he was building something much bigger. A kingdom, a team, and a future. And with his family by his side, there was nothing he couldn't achieve.